It must be the most brazen ram raid in recent memory. Last night, almost 20 teenagers in 3 cars forced their way into an East Auckland mall.
What are you doing?
I'm watching the news. Man, we're really going downhill.
What are you talking about?
There's more crime than ever. It's an epidemic. There's ram raids, youth offending. It's like the purge.
Yeah, it's a mean world, all that.
That is until a gang of youths
It's not just you, there's a lot of crime reporting in the news. If you look at the Herald any day of the week, you're bound to find an article providing the gory details of some criminal activity or another. Take this shot of the Herald, or even better, this shot of One News. Crime reporting is a staple of the New Zealand media landscape. Crime reporting is when you see a news source run an article that details some kind of illegal activity. Most commonly, you'll find cases of theft, burglary, assault, but other times you'll find cases like murder or other serious offences. This isn't a new phenomenon. Crime reporting has been a part of the media landscape since the 18th century, where newspapers would provide summaries of criminal court cases. In theory, crime reporting, as with most news, is good in how it allows people to become more informed of the world around them. If you see that there's a criminal on the loose currently in your town, because you saw it on the news, you can lock your door. Information provided by crime reporting has enabled you to make smarter choices about your life. Another example, if you're a small business owner and see a news article about a string of dairy robberies, maybe you invest in a fog cannon or push the government to subsidise them. And this does happen. In 2023, the New Zealand government did begin a program to fund fog cannons for retailers. This is likely related to the media attention about robberies, making retailers demand that the government do something to protect them from the robberies they see on the news. And this may have helped to mitigate the risk of being robbed for some of those retailers. Great. Crime reporting seems like a massive positive. Good for journalism? Gold star. But how real was that risk in the first place? What happens when the information that crime reporting brings you isn't entirely accurate? What happens when crime reporting creates a worldview that doesn't really align with the world around us? And ultimately, the news media focus too much on crime reporting.
So anyways, did you hear there was another ram raid in South Auckland?
Hang on this again.
I mean it. Crime is bad everywhere, but especially there.
You know what the real crime is?
What?
Switzerland not winning Eurovision 2021.
Cultivation theory, oh no, not that kind of cultivation theory, is basically the idea that the media we consume influences our outlook of the world. The central hypothesis of cultivation analysis is that people who spend more time watching television are more likely to perceive the real world in a way as most commonly depicted in television messages, as compared to those who watch less television. So this is kind of like how after watching a ton of gay romance TV shows, I convinced myself my crush would like me back.
What you say? That you only meant well, 'cause you did.
And the more TV you watch, the more likely you are to believe the worldview that television paints of the world around us. And this isn't just true of television, it applies to essentially all media products, including journalism. Speaking of media products, it's starting to feel like I'm in a home renovation show right now. 1 second. Much better. So, media exposure can make us view the world in a particular way. Mean world syndrome is the idea that because a lot of media contains themes of violence, aggression, people doing bad things, it can actually cause us to perceive the world as a lot worse than it actually is.
A man killed in an unprovoked one-punch attack. A horrifying. The killer's been convicted again for the same type of assault.
Shots were fired at officers this morning as an armed man led them on a pursuit in West Auckland.
Knife crime is on the rise. It's up around 20% over the last 2 years.
The man is recovering in hospital after a shooting in Manukau last night, adding to a spate of gun crimes that swept across South Auckland.
I think we all know where I'm heading. When the news frequently reports on crime, it contributes to a media landscape where a significant number of depictions of the world around us are violent. This is even more significant because when people consume news, they operate under the assumption that it is an accurate depiction of the world around them. If you're constantly seeing crime on the news, you might believe it's more significant than it actually is. After all, you see news articles on crime incidents multiple times a day. Even if crime hasn't affected you personally, there is now a spotlight on all significant crime events. The sheer frequency of this violent crime media makes us believe that the world as a whole is more violent, more mean, than it actually is. Our brains are absorbing the frequent depictions of crime on the news and coming to the conclusion that crime and violence must happen a lot. Crime reporting is helping to construct the mean world in our minds. Much like me telling my crush I liked him, this is a bad situation. I mentioned earlier how crime reporting helps us to be aware of the world around us. But if it really does contribute to a warped view of reality, is it making us more aware of the world around us, or distorting it? Sure, maybe the fog cannons did get put in place because of crime reporting, but did we ever really need them? But hey, maybe the fog cannons did lead to a misdirection of government funds, and we suffer a slightly warped perception of reality. It's not like extensive crime reporting can have any worse impacts. Right?
Another ram raid in South Auckland? Another ram raid in South Auckland?
Adding to a spate of gun crime that swept across South Auckland over the weekend.
Oh no, it gets worse. On most given days, a Google search for South Auckland will reveal a wealth of information about crimes committed in the region. Media articles on South Auckland disproportionately focus on the negative aspects of the region. This contributes to its marginalisation and exclusion from mainstream New Zealand culture. This is especially significant when you consider that Māori and Pacifica people comprise a large proportion of the area's population. This additional marginalisation may compound pre-existing systemic marginalisation. To put this another way, the articles that focus on South Auckland are articles that focus on criminal acts in South Auckland, crime reporting. This means that you begin to associate South Auckland with the criminal depictions seen in the news. After all, that's the only information your brain has to work with. Now, this isn't a perfect example, but my only knowledge of the country of Slovenia comes from its 2023 Eurovision entry. My brain literally can't form associations with Slovenia outside of the context which media has informed it of. That's all the information it has to work with. So, if someone from Slovenia is watching, I'm sorry, but this is all I associate your country with. That was, admittedly, a poor joke. Because, unlike me associating Slovenia with an underrated gem of a pop song, the connection which media draws between South Auckland and crime is an inherently negative one. It's important to note that this negative association between South Auckland and crime contributes to, as put it, marginalisation and exclusion from mainstream New Zealand culture. It's unlikely that any individual article is going to cause the marginalisation of South Auckland from the rest of New Zealand, and it's unlikely that any journalist reporting crime in South Auckland does so out of a place of malice. But individual articles aren't the problem. The worldview which this collective, constant mass of crime reporting generates is one of a violent, unstable, and unsafe area. And this view of South Auckland worsens people's opinions of South Auckland. It means companies may not want to open locations in the area, limiting jobs. It may make housing more difficult to find as landlords look out for the criminals they keep seeing on the news. It means less people moving into the region and less outside spending as less people visit. This is all happening to an area which already faces systemic marginalisation and is primarily inhabited by Māori and Pacifica people who already face systemic marginalisation, specifically those who comprise a large proportion of South Auckland's population. I've been sat here for a while, so for pacing reasons, let's change the location. Because it does get worse. Regional stereotyping isn't the only way that crime reporting can cultivate warped worldviews. For one thing, there are negative impacts for Māori and Pacifica people in extensive crime reporting. While not strictly journalistic crime reporting, racial overrepresentation within crime media can be seen incredibly clearly in the Police 10-7 controversy. For those of you who don't know, Police 10-7 was a reality TV show which would follow police as they fight crime.
A mediocre reality show where they exploit mostly marginalised people suffering for entertainment.
Unsurprisingly, as said about Police 10-7 in a comment from Auckland councillor Ifiso Collins, this stuff feeds on racial stereotypes. In fact, people of colour, Māori people specifically, were so overrepresented in Police 10-7 that when the then Chief Executive of TVNZ, Rick Ellis, had to defend the broadcaster's diversity, he cited Māori representation in Police 10-7. You did it! Woo! You did it! Police 10-7 was essentially a form of reality TV-ified crime reporting. It's an incredibly strong sample of what crime media companies choose to report on. And the sample tells us that when media companies in New Zealand look for crime stories, they will more often than not look to Māori and Pacifica people to fill those roles. Now, if we can assume that this trend is present in less reality TV-ified crime reporting, then there's likely to be an overrepresentation of Māori and Pacifica people in crime reporting. This is important because if you see two already marginalised groups feature more in television crime reporting, then you may begin to perceive those groups as contributing to a greater amount of crime, therefore furthering racial prejudices. Now, this poor representation for Māori and Pacifica people isn't just limited to crime reporting. It's a wider issue in the New Zealand media landscape, stemming from a lack of Māori and Pacifica representation in senior roles at New Zealand media companies, resulting in less individuals who are aware of and will push for more positive Māori and Pacifica representation within New Zealand media. And even if Māori and Pacifica people were to receive the same proportion of crime reporting as Pākehā, there's still the issue of proportionality of reporting. Raises the important issue that when a group of people has the vast majority of media coverage they receive involve committing crime, because the media, for the most part, doesn't acknowledge their existence in any other way, then that begins to build an association in your mind. You may associate that group with crime, therefore reinforcing existing and entrenched racial prejudices. So crime reporting may reinforce racial prejudices, both due to overrepresentation of Māori and Pacifica people compared to Pākehā, and due to crime reporting comprising a significant portion of the total media attention received by Māori and Pacifica people. Not only that, but there's the impact on young people. Recently, crime reporting is pushing this overarching narrative about a youth crime wave. For starters, this is false. Youth crime is actually decreasing, and yeah, young people commit a lot of the total crime, but that's just always been the case. Crime reports focusing on rising crime for young people make it seem like society is entering into the world of A Clockwork Orange, but we just aren't. And these narratives are harmful. If you perceive a group as being a greater threat, you may support stricter measures against them, like sending them all to boot camp when they step out of line, or treating them all more harshly in courts in spite of UN legislation. No, obviously that's an idiotic idea. I mean, who would ever support that? This focus on a youth crime wave as a supernatural phenomenon also just misses the point. Youth crime isn't caused by some supernatural force, COVID, phones, soft parenting, TikTok. It's disillusionment at the end of the day. And if youth reporting focuses on crime and not a world where the planet is melting, wages are dropping, most people will never be able to afford to buy a house, and the gap between rich and poor feels larger than ever, then it misses the deeper discourse on youth crime and does a disservice to the viewer. Youth crime reporting is a superficial form of journalism that furthers stereotypes about young people and prevents more meaningful discourse on youth crime. I figured out who I'm gonna vote for.
Here we go again.
If I vote for then they'll fix the crime rise caused by Now, I don't normally agree with their policies, but this crime rise is so bad, and let's face it, we need all the help we can get.
So, you mean they'll invest in better social programs, unemployment schemes, housing, and education?
No, obviously they're gonna lock them up. Earlier, I touched on the youth boot camps proposed by National, an ACT-proposed plan to try young people as adult offenders in the court systems. But these events, much like a 2020 UK Conservative Party gathering, are not isolated. These policies and others are part of a catchphrase which appears to be ingrained in our political collective consciousness. The phrase, tough on crime. But what does tough on crime mean? Well, tough on crime isn't a set policy agenda so much. It's more of a vibe, man. Tough on crime is going after the gangs, locking up the criminals, stopping the crime wave brought on by the other party, harsher penalties, reinstating law and order, personally kissing every police officer. Tough on crime is when a political actor uses the frustration caused by a perceived hike in crime as campaign leverage, and it's effective. Oftentimes, elections will come down to being perceived as tough on crime, and who the best party is to decrease perceived crime. But there's an issue there. Tough on crime only works if there's a perception of crime. You can't campaign against what people don't think exists. What isn't a problem? Crime reporting helps make the problem exist. Crime reporting in the news draws our attention to existing crime, and, as I explained earlier, makes us perceive the world as though it has more crime than it actually does. It makes the world meaner. This puts us in a situation where voters are being shown a constant stream of crimes with human costs, perceiving a massive problem, and an increase in the problem, and then being offered a solution by tough on crime parties. Not only does it offer a solution, but it plays on our desire for justice. It's not very frequent where you have a media product where those who do wrong don't receive their comeuppance, but this very often doesn't happen in the news, which, shockingly, doesn't follow a simple narrative structure. Tough on crime promises a resolution to the narrative. It's a very satisfying offer, and it compels people to support candidates who promise to lock up those who do wrong.
But there's another piece to this political scapegoat puzzle. Not this puzzle though. This lost most of its pieces ages ago. In 2017, Fox News ran an article on racist trees. Specifically, the woke mob going after trees for being racist. But what does this have to do with crime reporting? Well, for one, I just think it's funny. And two, it highlights the idea of false consciousness. False consciousness is something nerdy communists love to talk about. The idea, in Marxist theory, is that existing power structures can contribute to beliefs which are not a true representation of one's position within society. But in a more media-centric context, it essentially applies to when media alters your perception of the world to make you less focused on the issues which actually impact you most. One of the most common ways in which false consciousness is proliferated is when media attention censors topics as vital issues, which are not indicative of the issues that society actually faces. And this is where we get to crime reporting. Because when media portrayals of crime focus on crime as an almost supernatural event, and that due to their sheer frequency illustrate crime as an issue of almost national importance, then crime becomes the issue. Instead of focusing on the inequality that causes crime or the rising costs of living that we are currently facing, we focus on the crime itself. Instead of focusing on the root issue of inequality in our society and fixing it with more equitable policy, we focus on fixing crime. But you can't fix a symptom. False consciousness from crime reporting makes us think of crime as the issue, distracting us from the underlying issues that cause crime. If we're serious about tackling crime, we need to tackle poverty. If, instead of focusing on the crime itself in their news reporting, media companies funded more expensive and ultimately more meaningful investigations on the poverty and inequality that causes crime, then society is in a much better place to understand the issues that cause crime, instead of hyperfixating on the crime itself without the wider societal context. So, crime reporting enables typically more conservative parties, who typically don't pay as much attention to the nuances of what causes crime, to utilize tough on crime platforms to win voters without addressing the underlying cause of crime, or even proposing decent policies. In my opinion, this is an unfortunate political outcome. I don't think a fair and functioning democracy should have political punching bags that allow parties to bypass addressing real issues, and crime reporting is a vital enabling factor in political parties' use of the crime punching bag.
Boy, I sure do love our lemon water Thursdays.
Did you hear about that petrol station robbery? That's the 5th one this week. They just keep happening.
Why are you still going on about this? Like, you're constantly talking about this or reading horror articles on this. Like, there are actual, real, tangible societal issues going on. So why are you so focused on this?
What could possibly be more important than this massive crime epidemic?
Switzerland not winning Eurovision 2021.
So why do we care? Because we know it's problematic, and we know these articles are repetitive. Why is crime reporting so significant? But to answer this question, we actually need to go back to the 18th of April, 1930. I don't know why I put on these sunglasses. On the 18th of April 1930, the BBC reported that there was nothing to report. A day with no news. This is something that the news media in general has sworn to never repeat. There always has to be news for all available airtime. We will never again have nothing to report. Broadcasters have stuck to this idea, and increasingly, there's also more airtime. Initially, back in the olden days, there were daily broadcasts, and before that, daily newspapers. About one portion of news per day. But with the advent of 24-hour news, Facebook news, Google News, and the internet, news companies are always effectively on air. There needs to be news to report 24/7. No more one portion of news a day. We need to be constantly drip-fed news 24/7, or the companies that provide news will lose revenue. But it's not like you can just make more newsworthy content. No matter how much the Herald has gone downhill with content, it's not going to go out and cause wars to have more to report on. But what you can do as a news company is broaden your definition of the term news. Cast the net wide. Look to whatever is necessary to fill your endless quota. And what could be better than something that is constantly happening and has human stakes? And that's crime reporting. Need some news? Check your sources for a juicy bit of crime, and write an article on it. Bonus points if you tie it into a wider crime epidemic to really get your viewers riled up. Much like Mons Zelmerlo to post-2015 Eurovision, even if it isn't the most groundbreaking, useful, informative, or even interesting, crime is always available to be used to fill up time, because it will always be there for your media company. No matter how good your society is, crime is probably always going to be happening. But that's not all there is to it, because if news companies just flooded their feeds with content that no one cares about, no matter how constant it is, people would stop caring and they'd lose revenue. But people don't stop caring about crime. Did you hear that? If it bleeds, it leads. It's a commonly known trope that, to quote tvtropes.org, the more lurid the story, the better its chances of being the ratings leader. Violent, lurid, brutal media does better. There's a kind of psychology about it. You care about what is clearly dangerous and illicit. The pain of others, not enjoyable, but very interesting. It can make you feel scared, sympathetic, angry. It's engaging. And crime reporting is brilliant for this. It's inherently illicit. It can be violent. It's destructive. What more could you want to pull in viewers? It's bleeding, so it's leading. If you want content that is bound to get viewers, why not crime reporting? Lurid stories to entice viewers and therefore increase your revenue. Does your news company need a reliable source of content?
Yeah.
Does your news company need content that will reliably bring in viewers?
Yeah.
Well, you should try crime reporting, a constant source of news that's sure to bring in the big bucks.
Thanks to crime reporting, I don't have to fund large investigative journalism projects or report on content that make my viewers uncomfortable. Now, I just dig up some crime in South Auckland and have a constant stream of content that pulls in viewers.
Oh, you know that RAM radio I talked about before?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently they're hosting a fundraiser to help rebuild.
Huh. Cool. Anyways, did you hear about that robbery in Christchurch? So crime reporting is a product that, in spite of its political, psychological, and marginalizing impact is a constant source of ratings and content. Simultaneously, the notion that crime reporting does this journalistic job of making you aware of your world also fails to hold up because of the fact that crime reporting may actually distort your view of the world more than it actually serves to paint an accurate picture of crime. This results in a worldview that makes you more susceptible to prejudices against communities, racial groups, regions, and even young people. A worldview that makes individuals more susceptible to tough-on-crime rhetoric. And a worldview that distracts from more important societal issues. Not only that, but crime reporting may be acting as a substitute to more expensive and important investigative journalism, or journalism which focuses more on uplifting marginalized communities. So, to answer the question posed at the beginning of this essay, yes, news media focuses too much on crime reporting.
This isn't an easy issue to resolve. Anyway, here's Wonderwall.
Today is gonna be the day that the
No, this can't be the end. Trapped in this hellhole of bland, unhelpful journalism. I want this essay to end on a positive. So, here is my plan to fix our crime reporting problem. Renationalise TVNZ. We've tried the profit-driven SOE thing, but journalism under the profit motive can mean that more popular, lower-cost, more harmful content, such as crime reporting, can get prioritised over more costly, potentially less popular investigative journalism, or journalism that uplifts marginalised communities. If we nationalise TVNZ, then we can reduce the significance of the profit motive and mandate more inclusive and enlightening journalism in New Zealand. If a strong, well-funded state broadcaster in New Zealand can set a standard for journalism in the country, the private companies may follow suit, leaving us with a stronger overall media and journalism landscape. And don't tell me RNZ already does this, because RNZ doesn't have anywhere near the same level of prestige or popularity as TVNZ. For instance, as can be seen in New Zealand On Air's survey Where Are the Youth Audiences, TVNZ controls the most used local streaming platform in New Zealand, is the most trusted news source in the country, and TVNZ1 is the TV channel with the biggest market share in New Zealand. TVNZ is the media company that matters in New Zealand. If they set the standard, the rest will follow. Thank you for watching. I've been Josef, a European Broadcasting Union fanboy who just said that public broadcasters are good. A truly unique and original take.
Haben Luftballon gefunden. Denk an dich und lass ihn